Russia and Ukraine share deep historical roots in the East Slavic civilization. Despite common origins, their paths diverged through unity and conflict. The Kievan Rus in the 9th century laid the foundation for both nations. Fragmentation and external pressures led to their separate trajectories. Muscovy's rise led to the Tsardom of Russia expanding its territories. The Treaty of Pereyaslav in 1654 marked Ukraine's integration into the Russian Empire. Tsarist rule suppressed Ukrainian culture and language. The Holodomor in the 1930s exposed the brutal realities of Soviet policies. Ukraine reclaimed independence in 1991, facing economic dependence on Russia. The Orange Revolution and Revolution of Dignity highlighted Ukraine's commitment to democracy. Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 marked a turning point. The ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine has had a devastating impact. The 1917 Russian Revolution created a power vacuum. Ukrainian national movements sought autonomy. The Bolshevik Revolution presented both an opportunity and a threat to Ukraine's independence. Ukraine declared independence as the Ukrainian People's Republic post-Bolshevik Revolution. The Russian Civil War saw Ukraine caught in shifting alliances. By 1922, Ukraine was incorporated into the USSR, facing rapid industrialization and repression. The Holodomor in the 1930s was a man-made famine by Stalin's regime. Millions of Ukrainians perished from starvation. The Holodomor remains a powerful symbol of Ukrainian resilience. World War II brought new horrors to Ukraine. The Nazi occupation was brutal, followed by Soviet reassertion. Post-war borders and resistance to Soviet rule sowed future tensions. Gorbachev's reforms in the 1980s unleashed forces leading to the Soviet Union's demise. Glasnost allowed Ukrainians to discuss their history and identity. The Chernobyl disaster further eroded trust in the Soviet regime. The Berlin Wall's fall in 1989 symbolized the end of Cold War division. Nationalist movements in the Soviet Union gained momentum. Ukraine's movement for independence, RUK, gained widespread support. On December 1, 1991, Ukrainians went to the polls in a historic referendum to decide their future. The question on the ballot was simple but profound. Do you confirm the act of declaration of independence of Ukraine? The referendum, a testament to the democratic aspirations of the Ukrainian people, offered a chance to break free from the shackles of Soviet rule and chart their own course. The results of the referendum were unequivocal. Over 90% of Ukrainians voted in favor of independence, sending a clear message to Moscow and the world that Ukraine's future lay as a sovereign and independent nation. The referendum, conducted peacefully and democratically, marked a watershed moment in Ukrainian history, a triumph of hope over fear, of self-determination over imperial domination. The announcement of the referendum results triggered scenes of jubilation across Ukraine. People took to the streets, waving Ukrainian flags, singing patriotic songs, and celebrating their newfound freedom. The decades of Soviet rule, with its repression, economic stagnation, and denial of Ukrainian identity, were finally over. A new chapter in Ukrainian history had begun. The overwhelming vote for independence in Ukraine dealt a fatal blow to any hopes of preserving the Soviet Union. Facing mounting pressure from within and outside the country, Gorbachev had little choice but to accept the reality of the situation. On December 25, 1991, Gorbachev resigned as president of the Soviet Union, formally dissolving the empire that had dominated Eastern Europe and Central Asia for decades. On December 26, 1991, the United States, Russia, and other world powers formally recognized Ukraine's independence. The world watched as Ukraine, a nation with a rich history and culture long suppressed under the yoke of empires, emerged from the ashes of the Soviet Union, determined to forge its own destiny. Ukraine's newfound independence, however, came with a complex set of challenges. The country inherited a legacy of economic dependence on Russia, a vast Soviet-era military-industrial complex in need of reform, and a complex ethnic and linguistic landscape. Furthermore, the presence of a significant Russian-speaking population in eastern Ukraine, coupled with Russia's historical reluctance to accept Ukrainian sovereignty, cast a long shadow over the young nation's future. The issue of the Black Sea Fleet, a powerful Soviet naval force based in Crimea, became a major point of contention between Ukraine and Russia. After protracted negotiations, the two countries reached an agreement in 1997 to divide the fleet and lease the naval base at Sevastopol to Russia for 20 years. This agreement, while diffusing the immediate crisis, did little to address the underlying tensions over Crimea's status. Despite the challenges, Ukraine embarked on a path of democratic reform and economic liberalization. The country adopted a new constitution, held free and fair elections, and began to integrate into the global economy. However, the legacy of Soviet rule, with its centralized economic planning and corruption, proved difficult to shake off. Ukraine's transition to a market economy was marked by economic hardship, political instability, and social upheaval. The year 2004 marked a pivotal moment in Ukraine's post-Soviet journey. The presidential election, pitting pro-Western Viktor Yushchenko against pro-Russian Viktor Yanukovych, became a battleground for the soul of the nation. The election was marred by widespread fraud and intimidation, with Yanukovych declared the winner in a result widely seen as rigged. Ukraine faced a stark choice: succumb to manipulation or rise up in defense of its democratic aspirations. The response was extraordinary. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, galvanized by allegations of electoral fraud, poured into the streets. They came from all walks of life, united in their determination to defend their stolen votes. The Orange Revolution was a testament to the power of peaceful protest. For weeks, Independence Square became the epicenter of the revolution. Braving freezing temperatures, the protesters stood their ground, their orange scarves a symbol of their commitment to democracy. They sang patriotic songs, chanted slogans, and listened to speeches by opposition leaders. The Orange Revolution was a watershed moment for Ukraine and the post-Soviet space. It demonstrated the power of civil society and the enduring desire for freedom and democracy. The Orange Revolution sent a clear message to the Kremlin that Ukraine would not be bullied. Despite the setbacks of the Orange Revolution, Russia, under the increasingly assertive leadership of Vladimir Putin, remained determined to maintain its influence over Ukraine. Putin, a former KGB officer who viewed the collapse of the Soviet Union as a geopolitical catastrophe, saw Ukraine as an integral part of Russia's historical sphere of influence, a buffer state essential to Russia's security, and a key to restoring its lost greatness. Russia's strategy for keeping Ukraine within its orbit was multifaceted. It included economic pressure, leveraging Ukraine's dependence on Russian gas supplies and trade, as well as political manipulation, supporting pro-Russian politicians and parties, and seeking to sow discord within Ukrainian society. Moreover, Russia waged a relentless propaganda war using its vast media resources to portray Ukraine as a failed state, riven by nationalism and extremism, and to discredit pro-Western voices. The Kremlin viewed NATO's eastward expansion, which had brought the alliance closer to Russia's borders, with deep suspicion and hostility. Putin, convinced that the West was seeking to weaken and encircle Russia, saw NATO's overtures to Ukraine as a direct threat to Russia's security interests, a red line that, if crossed, would provoke a swift and decisive response. From Moscow's perspective, Ukraine's attempts to move closer to the West, whether through seeking membership in the European Union or exploring closer ties with NATO, were not merely acts of self-determination, but provocations orchestrated by the West to undermine Russia's security and influence. This worldview, fueled by historical grievances and a deep-seated mistrust of the West, would have catastrophic consequences for Ukraine. In the years leading up to 2014, Ukraine found itself caught in a geopolitical tug-of-war between Russia and the West. The Ukrainian government, led by Viktor Yanukovych, who had returned to power in 2010, sought to maintain a delicate balancing act, pursuing closer economic ties with Russia, while also seeking to preserve Ukraine's independence and sovereignty. This proved to be an increasingly untenable position. Yanukovych, facing mounting pressure from Moscow, agreed to postpone the signing of an association agreement with the European Union, a move seen by many Ukrainians as a betrayal of their aspirations for closer ties with the West. The Kremlin, seeking to draw Ukraine closer into its orbit, offered a multi-billion-dollar loan package and a discount on natural gas prices, sweeteners designed to lure Ukraine away from the EU's embrace. The proposed security deal, shrouded in secrecy and presented to Ukraine with little time for consideration, offered guarantees for Ukraine's territorial integrity in exchange for maintaining its neutral status, effectively precluding it from joining NATO. However, the deal was fraught with ambiguities and potential pitfalls, leaving Ukraine vulnerable to Russian pressure and manipulation. The security deal, far from guaranteeing Ukraine's security, sowed the seeds of future conflict. It created a false sense of security, lulling Ukraine into a false sense of complacency, while giving Russia time to prepare for its next move. The agreement's inherent flaws and ambiguities would come back to haunt Ukraine, paving the way for Russia's annexation of Crimea and the ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine. In the months that followed the signing of the security deal, an uneasy calm settled over Ukraine. The Yanukovych government, emboldened by Russian support and seemingly oblivious to the growing discontent among its own people, continued its crackdown on dissent, restricting freedom of speech, and persecuting political opponents. Beneath the surface of this superficial tranquility, however, tensions continued to simmer. The Ukrainian people, particularly in the western and central regions, felt betrayed by their government, their aspirations for a democratic and European future seemingly dashed. The memory of the Orange Revolution, with its spirit of defiance and its promise of a better future, lingered, fueling a deep-seated resentment towards the Yanukovych regime. In the east, particularly in the Donbas region, with its large Russian-speaking population and its economic dependence on Russia, pro-Russian sentiment remained strong, fueled by Russian propaganda and a sense of alienation from the Ukrainian government. These regional divisions, exploited by Russian intelligence agencies, created fertile ground for separatism and unrest. The stage was set for a confrontation that would have far-reaching consequences not only for Ukraine, but for the entire post-Soviet order. The security deal, intended to prevent conflict, had inadvertently set in motion a chain of events that would plunge Ukraine into chaos and draw Russia and the West into a dangerous new standoff. The year 2014 shattered the illusion of a stable European security order. In Ukraine, discontent erupted into open revolt. The Euromaidan protests, sparked by Yanukovych's pivot to Russia, spiraled into a nationwide uprising. The Yanukovych government, backed by Russia, used brutal tactics to quell the unrest. Riot police clashed with demonstrators, leaving dozens dead and hundreds injured. The violence shocked the world, drawing condemnation and support for the protesters. Yanukovych fled to Russia, leaving a power vacuum. Russia quickly exploited the situation. Russian troops seized control of Crimea. Russia annexed Crimea, violating international law. The annexation shattered illusions of a post-Cold War partnership. The annexation of Crimea was merely a prelude to a wider campaign to destabilize Ukraine. Putin set his sights on the Donbas, a region with a significant Russian-speaking population. Russia orchestrated a separatist uprising, arming and funding militants who seized control of key buildings. The Ukrainian government deployed its military to regain control of the Donbas. The conflict escalated into a full-blown war, with heavy artillery and tanks. The war settled into a bloody stalemate, claiming thousands of lives and displacing millions. The Donbas conflict became a microcosm of the wider geopolitical struggle between Russia and the West. The plight of Ukraine stands as a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the enduring human cost of conflict. Russia's actions have plunged Ukraine into a maelstrom of violence and uncertainty, leaving scars that will take generations to heal. Yet the spirit of the Ukrainian people remains unbroken. Ordinary Ukrainians have displayed extraordinary courage and resilience. The international community has rallied to Ukraine's side, providing aid and support. The future of Ukraine remains uncertain, a tragic story yet to be fully written. Will it emerge stronger, its sovereignty secured, or remain trapped in a protracted struggle?